All right, so great to see a full room here. My name is Bethany Sargent. I work as the Outreach Coordinator with the Clean Water Initiative Program, and we're joined today by Jim Ryan, who's the Municipal Roads Coordinator, and he will be providing an update on the final Municipal Roads General Permit. That was just recent. We are recording the presentation, and we have folks participating online. If you are listening in online, just let me know. If you send me an IM or instant message, I'll be fielding any technical issues. And if you have questions and you're listening online, if you could also type those in, and I'll field those in the room. It'll just make it go a little bit smoother. And Jim, do you prefer to have questions throughout or at the end? Do you have a preference?
I think if folks have a question related to a slide I have up, it might be good to have the question then, but if not, we can do it at the end.
Okay, great.
All right.
I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jim.
Good morning, everyone. Everybody online, everybody in the room. Glad to have everybody here. The Municipal Roads General Permit, or MRGP, was issued on January 26th, just a couple of weeks ago. We had quite an extensive effort in developing it, and multiple people in the room, and programs and organizations, regional planning commissions, and the League of Cities and Towns, different programs at VTrans, and local roads and better roads, and others that I'm probably not mentioning, and folks within DEC that have been provided a lot of input along the way. And we thought it was a very open and transparent process, and we welcomed a lot of input. We had about 189 comments to the permit when it was out on public notice, which I think improved the permit quite a bit. Okay, folks, everybody hearing okay and seeing okay? Okay.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Today's presentation, we're going to cover roads and water quality, some timelines with the new Municipal Roads Permit and coverage, exactly what's covered. We're going to get into municipal road connectivity, talk a little bit about the road erosion inventories and prioritization of the very high priority road segments, and prioritization in the implementation table, the municipal roads standards, fees, and then some technical and financial assistance that's available for municipalities. These are the latest, greatest road miles, municipal road miles reported by municipalities annually in their mileage certificates to VTrans as required by statute. That 13,090 miles is the latest numbers that we have. And that represents about 70% of the total road miles in the state, the largest chunk by far. We have a little bit under 1% of federal highway, and we have 14% of the roads in the state are state highway, and the balance are private roads, about 15%. Again, these are the latest numbers by road class. The lion's share of municipal roads are Class 3. That's your typical Vermont gravel backcountry road. We have Class 2s represent about 21%, sometimes paved, sometimes gravel. We have Class 4 roads. There's a minimal level of maintenance by municipalities, generally higher up in the watershed. Steeper roads represent a little bit over 12%, and a very small percent, a little bit over 1%, are Class 1 roads that are generally maintained both by the municipality and VTrans, and those are usually in village center roads. So, why was the Municipal Roads General Permit created? Often we have, really the Municipal Roads Program is meant to address stormwater from municipal roads. And we have other erosion sources around roads, like stream bank erosion, for example, or lakeshore erosion. But the focus on the Municipal Roads Permit is to really address the runoff coming from roads. And what we typically see is coming off of roads in general, we have a lot of sediment. In turn, we have a lot of phosphorus. Anything that can be discharged from an automobile or applied to a road It's hydraulic fluid, gasoline, oil, road salt can wind up in our waterways. This is a diagram from the Lake Memphremagog Total Maximum Daily Load, TMDL, which is a modeled phosphorus load from different sources. And I'd like to use this pie chart. We also have one for Lake Champlain. This one breaks down road phosphorus sources from gravel roads and paved roads. So keeping in mind that those numbers on the upper right of the pie chart there are from all roads, so that's also includes state highway and private roads. So if we prorate that by 70%, we get about 6.6% of phosphorus to Lake Memphremagog is modeled to be coming from municipal roads. It's very similar numbers for Lake Champlain. And we can see a lot of other sources. Agriculture is the lion's share, both in Lake Memphremagog watershed, Lake Champlain, and the rest of the state, about 40%. A little bit. This one is a little bit higher for Magog. Stream bank erosion is also in there, a little bit over 20%. And we have erosion from forested lands and other developed lands as well. So Act 64 was created to address a lot of the water quality issues that we've been having statewide, whether it's Lake Memphremagog, Lake Champlain watershed. Also, we have the Long Island Sound that the eastern part of the state drains to. We have also a total maximum daily load for nitrogen for the eastern part of the state. So we have other benefits for water quality. We've seen a lot of these photos from Tropical Storm Irene and more recent, more localized events. We have seen that a lot of the damage to the transportation infrastructure network, whether it's state highway, private, or municipal, can be avoided if we're proactive and put in some of these best management practices that we're going to be discussing today. At the heart of these practices is really improving the drainage of the road network. And when we improve the drainage, we improve the flood resiliency. There's less chance of these roads washing out in these increasing flash flood events. And a progression from, in the photos on the screen here are from rill erosion or shallow erosion to gully erosion, a deeper erosion, to what we call catastrophic failure on the right. And also, just a point that after the initial higher cost of implementing these practices, we've seen many studies where we have long-term savings, both financial and in labor for municipalities in putting these practices in and reduce maintenance costs. So our timeline for the Municipal Roads General Permit. The red arrow is where we are now, just issuing the permit in January, just a couple weeks ago. As I mentioned, we had a 2-year lead up for this process, and we had 5 public meetings this fall. We had a 46-day comment period. We had 189 comments. Our time is limited here today, so we can't really delve into the public comment document because there are so many of them. But a lot of the comments have been addressed in our responsiveness summary, which is available on the Municipal Roads General Permit website, as much of this information, including this presentation. So just some highlights that I'm going to jump into in more detail in the presentation. We have a July 31st deadline where municipalities will submit a NOI or notice of intent. That's a municipality applying for coverage under the permit. They'll also pay an administrative processing fee at that time, a $240 fee. DEC will be sending out a mailing to all municipalities about where they can fill out the NOI form. It will be a 1-page form, and we'll have a link to that where it'll be electronically fillable form, and towns can print that out and send it in with the check for July 31st. The next deliverable, if you will, would be April 1st of 2019, will be the first annual report. I'll get into that in a little detail in a minute. The more major deliverable is the December 31st, 2020 date. That's when all municipalities will have a road erosion inventory of all of their connected municipal roads, and the results of those road erosion inventories will be transferred into the implementation table. The other two major deliverables on this timeline, starting in 2021 or sooner, between 2021 and 2022, for the total of those 2 calendar years, municipalities will be required to bring 15% of their roads that are currently not compliant with our standards up to the standards in that 2-year window. A little bit, as we look a little bit further on the timeline, on the right of the timeline, that's really our drop-dead date of all connected municipal roads need to meet the standards in the permit by December 31st, 2036. That's also tied to the Lake Champlain total maximum daily load deadlines and the Magog deadlines as well. And in between then, we have another deadline of the very high priority roads, except for class 4 roads, will have to be brought up to standards sooner. That date is December 31st, 2025. The class 4 road, very high priority roads, will have to be brought up to the standards by December 31st, 2028. And annual reports due throughout on April 1st. So what or who is covered under the Municipal Roads General Permit? State highways, classes 1, 2, 3, and 4 roads, and the stormwater infrastructure associated with town highways under the operational control of the municipality. The exemptions are unorganized towns and GORs, and MS4 towns are exempt from the permit, having to apply for coverage under the permit and paying the fees, but their practices, their required standards would be incorporated in their future stormwater management plans.
What are MS4 towns?
A lot of the Chittenden County towns, and as well as St. Albans and Rutland towns, and Rutland City will be joining those. Those are under the multi-sector permit, which is a separate, actually more expensive permit.
If they're exempt from the fee, how is it more expensive?
But there's an MS4 fee, which is a more expensive fee. What is not covered by the permit are perennial streams. So any culvert crossing on a perennial stream or any retrofit to a perennial stream, those are covered by the DEC stream alteration permit. So none of the standards are applicable to perennial stream related crossings. Also, the MRGP does not require stream bank or lakeshore bank protection along road embankments. So if you have an eroded road embankment because of an eroding stream or stream in disequilibrium, or lakeshore wave action or ice action that's causing erosion, that is not required to be addressed as part of the permit. And also, if these permit requirements would trigger another state or federal permit, that practice will be waived. In other words, so we don't want to have the MRGP permit having to trigger another permit. There is an exception here from the Army Corps of Engineers non-reporting or self-verification permit. So when what do we mean when we talk about hydrologically connected road segments? The road segment is 1/16 of a mile. That's 328 feet. We broke them down into that very small level so we can evaluate smaller chunks of municipal road that meet or don't meet our standards, so we can look at the slopes and the proximity of different road segments to water resources. We have created this connectivity map on our Agency of Natural Resources Atlas, and there's a lot of great information on the Atlas. And if you click on the municipal roads layer theme, you will automatically get a map that looks like the one on the screen here. And in the Quick Tools tab, you can enter your municipality name, and it'll bring up the connected road layer for your town. So on the map here, the white segments are the municipal roads. We have a water body and stream layer, and the purple segments are those connected roads that are close to water.
Jim, question
Sure.
online. Someone's asking if you can please explain the Army Corps exemption a little more.
Sure. The quick answer is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a new general permit, statewide Vermont general permit, and underneath their new, that just came into effect January 1st of this year, and they have 25 or 26 different actual permit categories, and the Army Corps of Engineers has jurisdiction for perennial streams, wetlands, intermittent streams, and ephemeral streams. And there, if the footprint of, say, of a culvert replacement on an intermittent stream is less than 2,500 feet, and if the practice is that the culvert is changed out in the window June 1st to October 1st, it would be under the self-verification permit. Therefore, it's not non-reporting to the Army Corps of Engineers. And so some of our requirements for drainage culvert upgrades, if we have an eroding culvert and it needs to be upgraded to the municipal roads standard, could potentially trigger a DEC wetland permit or a Army Corps of Engineers permit, whether it's a wetland or a stream. So if it's under that self-verification permit under the Army Corps of Engineers, we're still going to be requiring that practice to be implemented as part of the MRGP.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so connected roads, more specific criteria. So if we have a municipal road class 1 through 4, and it was within 100 feet, it's really a GIS proximity analysis. So if it was in 100 feet of a water resource, or the municipal road bisected or crossed a water resource, or it was within the DEC river management river corridor layer, those would be flagged as connected. And so when we talk about a water resource, we're talking about perennial streams, intermittent streams, wetlands, lakes and ponds. So those would be flagged at the GIS level. There are opportunities for towns and those folks working for towns and doing the road erosion inventories to change the connectivity status of a segment based on field conditions. And those field criteria are in the new MRGP. So as long as they follow that criteria, they can change, add a road as connected or take a road off that was connected as not connected. And for paved roads with catch basins, the connectivity criteria is 500 feet out from the outfall of the catch basin to a water resource. The major pieces of the Municipal Roads General Permit are really first looking at that connected road layer, using our road erosion inventories to go out in the field and assess the condition of the connected roads to see if those connected road segments meet our standards, taking the results of the road erosion inventory and putting those results in the implementation table. We're working very closely with our GIS staff here at DEC and our database staff, and as well as the GIS staff at the regional planning commissions, so that we can do a lot of this work electronically. We can collect the road erosion inventory data in a collector application and summarize those results from the road erosion inventory into the implementation table. Question?
Yeah, there's a question
Sure.
from Rob at the Memorial County Planning Commission. Would you please explain why the catch basin 500 feet is much bigger than the 100 feet for road proximity?
The short answer to that question is that the outfall generally collects a larger drainage area, so we have to go a little bit further out from 100 feet to 500 feet.
Thanks.
This is a screenshot of the road erosion inventory form for, we have different road erosion inventory forms for different road types. This one is the most common for gravel roads with drainage, gravel and paved roads with drainage ditches. We also have a form for our catch basin outfalls and for class 4 roads as well. But just to give you a general sense, it's based on the percentage of the practice installed within each road segment. And we're going to get into the standards in a minute, but we look at road crown, we look at greater berm, we look at road shoulder, we look at turnouts or where that drainage ditch outlets relative to water. We look at drainage culverts and driveway culverts within the right-of-way. A town highway typical drawing on the screen there, and maybe a little bit fine print to read, but so we're really looking at the different parts of the road cross section to see if that practice is in place. So we look at the travel lane. So we're looking at the crown. We look at the shoulder. We're looking at the greater berm, and if we have a high road shoulder, we're looking at the drainage ditch area, whether that should be grass or stone line or what we call distributed flow, and then we also look at the culverts. So based on our road erosion inventories, we have essentially score each segment of road. It either fully meets our standards, it partially meets our standards, or it does not meet our standards. And partially meet and does not meet, they both mean does not meet. So in other words, towns will have to do work to bring them up to standards, whether it's a partial or a does not meet. It's generally a degree of work needed. A partially meet generally needs a little bit of work. A does not meet is generally more erosion and more need of practice installation. This is a preliminary pie chart based on data we received from folks at the Regional Planning Commissions doing the road erosion inventories, that we're finding of those connected road segments, so about 50% of municipal roads come up as hydrologically connected, and of that 50%, we're finding a little bit over half of those connected roads already meet our standards. So in other words, additional work is required by municipalities other than maintaining those practices. And of the balance that do not meet our standards, 29% partially meet, so they'll need a little bit of work. And the red 18% does not meet. Again, they'll need a higher level of work. So we mentioned this date before. The road erosion inventories will be due on December 31st, 2020, as well as the implementation table. The implementation table, the first implementation table, if you will, is essentially a snapshot of the results of the road erosion inventory results. All connected road segments would have to be brought up to the MRGP standards before December 31st, 2036. It's a picture of a hydroseeder there. We've been heavily promoting hydroseeders for municipalities. That is a quick way to get seed and mulch on a surface where recent work has been done, and that's really timely, especially for the fall ditching. So what do we mean by very high priority segments? So it's really that terminology is based on the different road types. For gravel and paved roads with drainage ditches, if they score does not meet, essentially the worst score on a very steep slope, greater than 10% slope, that means that it's a very high priority. And paved roads with catch basins, if we have significant erosion at the outfall, we changed this designation when we updated the permit after comments. That number is 3 cubic yards of erosion measured at the outfall. That is, so cubic yards, we have length multiplied by width, multiplied by depth, divided by 27. That gives us a cubic yard number. So we're just looking at the outfall. It's a significant erosion, like in the picture there, that would have to be addressed by 2025. Class 4 roads does not meet, so we have gully erosion. Gully erosion is a foot or deeper of erosion on a connected Class 4 road. So if that Class 4 road is close to water, and we have more than a foot of erosion, that's considered a very high priority road segment. That would have to be upgraded by 2028. We heard a lot of responses from municipalities on accessibility on Class 4 roads, and we gave them a little bit more time than the other road types. I just mentioned these dates, so the catch basin, very high priorities, and the gravel and paved roads with drainage ditches have to be upgraded before December 31st, 2025. This is a screenshot of the implementation table that I was mentioning earlier. We're putting the final touches on this with help from our DEC and Regional Planning Commission folks that are working on this. So to give you an idea, we have the segment identification number, town highway number, town road name. If there was a change in connectivity from the A&R Atlas, what is that road type? Is it paved in gravel with drainage ditches, or catch basin road, or Class 4 road? And who did the assessment, the date of the assessment, and what is that compliance score for that road segment? Is it fully, partially, does not meet? That 15% number is taken from the initial road erosion inventory, and so 15% of the does not meet or partially meet need to be upgraded before the end of the 2022 calendar year.
I'm sorry, who is going to be doing the assessments?
That is entirely up to the municipality. It could be the municipality themselves, or they can hire a consultant or regional planning commission. In some parts of the state, the National Resource Conservation Districts are doing those work. So it could be whoever the town chooses, as long as they use our road erosion inventory forms and put the data in the implementation table. So the components, the required components of the implementation table, we will have a template for towns to use. Again, the road erosion inventory results, the compliance scores, and towns will start reporting to us on that April 1st date where which segments of road they've worked on in order to get to their 15% number. And we need 100% implementation by the end of 2036.
Thanks. What is the frequency of DEC will accept proposed changes to the A&R Atlas connectivity status, and what will the protocol be for submitting those proposed changes?
The field changes in connectivity can happen at any time. We're not going to change the A&R Atlas layer, though. Just towns and folks working for towns have the ability to change that connectivity status at any time.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So what does this mean for your typical Vermont municipality? These numbers are actual statewide averages that we have thus far from the information we have collected. The average Vermont municipality has 52 road miles. We're finding that about half of those are considered connected or close to water. So this is really a math exercise. We start off with 52 road miles. 26 of those road miles are not considered connected, so there's no work required. Of the 26 road miles that are connected, we're finding in that earlier pie chart we showed that about half of those already meet the standards. So we subtract 13 road miles that currently meet in this example. And so 13 road miles in this example for this municipality would have to be brought up to the standards over that 18-year time period by the end of 2036. And that 15% number, 15% of 13 miles is just shy of 2 road miles in the first 2 years, 2021, 2022. Although many municipalities have been very proactive and are already implementing these practices, so they have a head start on that number. There's a question in the room. Did I see a hand? No. Nope.
Is there going to be any auditing or checking of the erosion inventories?
Yes. So we'll be doing regular spot compliance checks. So the annual report starts in April 1st, 2019, a little bit more than a year from now. And the first annual reports before the road erosion inventories are due will be a very simple form, and essentially we just want to make sure towns are working towards that progress in getting their road erosion inventories completed. And if they have done any work, they can let us know at that time. Again, the first 2 years of the permit, no implementation work is required, strongly recommended, but not required. We just want to know if they're keeping track that they've already done their road erosion inventory, or they're planning on doing it the upcoming field season. We just need to know what they'll be doing there, and any changes to the road segment compliance status. So in other words, if the town's worked on a bunch of road segments and they brought them up to standards, they can let us know that in their annual report.
Good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. So our principles overall, we think of the more broader principles when we get to a site. A lot of us in the room, online, spend a lot of time with road crew, road foremen, doing site visits and providing technical assistance. And I often encourage municipalities to start at the top of the hill or the road watershed and work our way down, walk down to the bottom of the hill where we generally have a water resource. Look for disconnection opportunities. So where can we get that runoff from the road off of the roadway and into a vegetated area as quick as possible? The more we shed further up, the more we shed the stormwater further up in that road watershed, the less erosion and sedimentation and other pollutants impacting the water resource down below. So we look for disconnection opportunities first, into infiltrating that into grass and forested areas. When we have to convey road stormwater, put it in a ditch or a culvert, we have to make sure that those conveyances are stable. So our ditches have to be grass or stone lined depending on slope. Our culverts have to be appropriately sized and not eroding from the pipe being too small, from erosion around the inlet or the outlet, and turning out that water whenever we can. So the end of that drainage ditch is not directly feeding into a water resource whenever possible. If that's not possible, it's at least stable with stone and grass. We're going to jump into the weeds a little bit, into the standards. How are we doing on time?
It's 11:30.
11:30, okay. We call the implementation triggers, so when a practice has to be implemented. We have baseline standards, so those have to be in place no matter what the road erosion inventory conditions are, even if there's not any erosion in place, as proactive practices. So that's our road grading, having that proper crown in place, grass and stone line, ditching or distributed flow or sheet flow, having greater berms removed, having our road shoulders lower than the travel lane, and having stable turnouts. The erosion-related triggers, implementation triggers, are mostly around culverts. So we're not requiring any upgrade or retrofits to culvert if they're stable, if there's no erosion. We're only requiring retrofits or upgrades if we have, whether it's rill, that shallow erosion, or gully erosion. If there's an erosion problem around a culvert, that culvert either has to be retrofitted with a culvert header or outlet stabilization, or upgraded depending on what's causing the erosion. A little visual again of our rill and gully erosion, shallow erosion versus deep erosion. This is a fairly new item that's going to come into place immediately. The 2018 field season. I field a lot of phone calls and emails from folks that we typically see in a lot of cases, towns doing their ditching in the fall and leaving their ditches through the winter. And we have fall and spring erosion if those ditching or culvert replacements are not stabilized with grass or stone. So that's, again, we're really promoting the use of hydroseeders. And there are smaller versions of hydroseeders that are a lot less expensive. So when towns are working on connected road segments, any of those purple highlighted road segments, doing any practice, they need to stabilize that within 5 days or an oncoming storm event. Okay, road crown. The top picture, we have water flowing parallel down the travel lane. That's what we're trying to avoid. We want it to shed in perpendicular fashion. We have multiple options. I always tell folks there's never just one way to meet the standards. We have lots of options. That top picture, we can create some ditches on either side, or we can bring the road surface up so the travel lane's higher than the sides. We can put some good gravel down. We can have on the bottom, on the left-hand side of this screen, on the bottom, that's our typical road crown, highest point in the middle. But we also can in-slope or out-slope. So we can pitch the road from one side to the other, especially if we're going around a turn. Sometimes that makes sense. If we have a steep embankment and we don't want to send the water down the steep embankment. So lots of options to meet that standard. Again, we have a grass line or it's erosion matting there on the top left, stone line on the right, and what we call distributed flow or sheet flow on the bottom left. So we want the road shoulders to be lower than the travel lane. If they can't be lower than the travel lane, we have to put the water in a ditch. And here are the specifics, slopes for the grass and stone line options. So again, we have the two middle columns are really the focus here of this table. If we have distributed flow or sheet flow, there's no ditch needed. So if we have the travel lane up higher than the road sides, that's good. Grass line ditch, we have in the 0 to less than 5% slope range. And if we jump to the bottom, greater than or equal to 8% requires stone, 6 to 8 inch minus minimum, 12 inch minus recommended for slopes greater than 10%. And in the middle, between that 5 and 8%, towns have options. This is a little bit different than the V-Trans Orange Book standard. We try to give towns a little bit more flexibility. If they can disconnect the water, so essentially put in 2 cross culverts or 2 turnouts within each road segment, it could just be grass lined. They could use grass line and check dams, or they can stone line. So we want to give towns some options on how to meet that standard. Turnouts. So this is the diagram on the left is a typical turnout, but they vary a little bit, where we have a road drainage ditch, and we have in this case we have a road bisecting a water resource. So we want to make sure that drainage ditch is turned away from the water resource whenever possible. If that's not possible, that it's stable with stone or grass, and the stone grass cut off there to trigger the stone is at 5%.
Question from Rob online. Would you please explain why the MRGP is 5 days for stabilization, but the Vermont Low-Risk Site Handbook has varying timelines based on weather?
I guess the simple answer is this permit's a little bit different than the other permits. That standard is also, I think it's also, I believe it's in the, it's either an Orange Book standard or maybe it's in the Better Roads Manual, but it's also in another standard as well. But we felt that 5 days was a fair amount of time. It gets too complicated if we start putting equations based on rainfall amounts and dates. So I wanted to try to keep it simple.
Okay. Thanks, Jim.
The picture on the right is a stone line ditch on the upper part of that photo, and we have a stream with bridge abutments. And in this case, the turnout had to go around the road abutment and it's stabilized with stone. This one I think is going to be one of the bigger lifts for towns. Getting rid of the greater berm is generally, towns don't need to apply for a grant funding to remove their greater berms. For the most part, unless they have extensive greater berms town-wide, when the towns generally grade their roads 3, 4, 5 times a year, that could be a good time to remove the greater berm. And so water can, again, not flow parallel down the road, so it can shed into the vegetated area or the ditch. High road shoulders, we try to parse out the high shoulders from the greater berm. That the high shoulders generally need a bigger piece of equipment, an excavator, a backhoe, a loader to remove that material, and dump trucks to haul it away because there has established vegetation there. But in this case, water cannot get off the road because the shoulder is up higher than the road. And alternatives, so the picture on the right is where that shoulder was lowered. And as I said earlier, the alternative is to bring up the roadbed by adding gravel. So as long as we could do one or the other. Driveway culverts within the right-of-way. We see some photos here of what a poorly installed driveway culvert can do to a municipal road. So in this case, the pictures on the left would not meet the municipal road standards due to rill and gully erosion. And the picture on the top is obvious that culvert is undersized and pretty rough shape. That's not a retrofit, that's a replacement. Driveway culvert minimum for replacement. The town has to replace a driveway culvert within the right-of-way. It's 15-inch. That's the same as the Orange Book standards. A lot of these standards are very similar to the existing Orange Book. I say the Orange Book standards, the V-Trans Road and Bridge standards. They're very similar to those standards. We tried to clarify and do it by road type and made a few minor changes relatively. And on the picture on the right was a Better Back Road or Better Roads grant project where the town went in and applied for a grant to do a stone line ditch along a long section of road and needed to install new driveway culverts, which was eligible for that program. Also eligible for grant and aid. Picture on the left doesn't meet standards. We have rill erosion. The culvert could be improperly installed, could be at the wrong angle, pretty poor backfill material, maybe not compacted. There could be lots of reasons why that is happening. Could need a header. So we're trying to find out in the road erosion inventory the degree of erosion, whether it's rill erosion or gully erosion, and where that erosion is happening. That'll help us decide what practices are needed, whether it needs to be retrofitted or replaced. Culvert outlet erosion, we see this a lot as well. We do have a drainage culvert minimum diameter of 18-inch. So when towns have to replace a drainage culvert, non-perennial stream culvert, it has to at least be 18 inches. Our river management program has developed intermittent stream culvert sizing guidance. That's on our Municipal Roads General Permit website, based on field measurements of the active channel and also by drainage area, by acreage going to that pipe. And we have a version of that on our website now. We'll shortly be updating that soon. But that's a recommendation. Often these drainage culverts carry intermittent stream flow, and they should be, in some cases, 3, 4, or 5 feet in diameter, and we're seeing a lot of those undersized and improperly installed. And this picture is a sequence of events of what can happen when we have culvert outlet erosion on the left and turning into gully erosion and a huge sedimentation problem to the brook at the bottom of the hill. Catch basin erosion. I don't know if Montpelier is in the room or online, but this was in Montpelier, and this is what we have going into our catch basin inlets, and we often have a lot of erosion on the outlet. Bad news: we have municipal roads fees associated. We have an annual operating fee. We have an application fee and administrative processing fee. Those were established in the 2015 fee bill. There is a good chance that those will be changed this upcoming legislative session. Stay tuned. Summary for municipalities. We have July 31st, permit coverage application, the NOI, Notice of Intent. Also, starting to pay the fees. The administrative processing fee will be due right away with the NOI. The other fees will be due a little bit later in the year, probably sometime in June of the following year from 2019. Annual reporting begins on April 1st, 2019. The road erosion inventory and implementation due December 31st, 2020. Implementation, so 2021, 2022 field seasons or sooner. 15% have to be brought up to standards that don't currently meet standards. And the very high priority segments have to be brought up to our standards for all road types except Class 4 by December 31st, 2025, and by December 31st, 2028 for Class 4 roads. All roads brought up to standards by December 31st, 2036. We have our new DEC grant and aid program. We have a flyer on our Municipal Roads General Permit for all financial assistance available for municipalities. We have Better Roads represented in the room here today for VTrans, and they have their Better Roads program that has funding available for Category A or road erosion inventories to cover 80% of road erosion inventories. Towns can use their time and mileage for in-kind. Also, categories B, C, and D grants to implement some of the practices that we just discussed here today under category B, and stream culvert replacements and bank stabilization as well. And grant and aid is a new program that DEC started last fiscal year, or this current fiscal year. We had 2.6 million last year, or this current fiscal year in funding. We had about 70% municipal participation. At the end of the fiscal year, we'll have about 42 municipal road miles that will have been brought up to our new standards as part of that grant implementation. So towns receive the funding. They agree to work on connected road segments that currently don't meet our standards, and they're agreeing to bring those segments up to our standards, so we'll know that that segment that they worked on currently meets the standards. The regional planning commissions are helping administer that grant and providing technical assistance. We're submitting a $2.9 million proposal for this next fiscal year.
Do you have any idea when the reimbursements will be made for work that was done last year?
I don't, Bethany, do you know?
I don't.
No.
Yeah, don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, we can follow up
We
with
can
you about
follow up.
that.
Jim, do you know if there's any federal capitalization for the grant aid program, or is that solely a state resource?
That's solely state resource, but we also have federal funding in Joel's program here in the room, in the stormwater mitigation funding. How much money do you have in there, Joel?
About $6 million last year, and then another $6 million next year.
So we had, for folks online, we had Joel from VTrans was saying we have about $6 million in federal funding available for stormwater-related practices, approximately $3 million in Better Roads, and in addition to the grant and aid funding that I just mentioned. All right, so it's pretty quiet in the room, pretty quiet online. We have a few questions. A lot of this information is on it's a very long URL there for our website, but if you Google Vermont DEC Municipal Roads Program, you will come to our website, and we have fact sheets, summary sheets, frequently asked questions, the PowerPoint, and a lot of this information that we conveyed. And now we can open things up a little bit.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes for questions. And just a reminder, if you want to go back to the presentation, the recording will also be posted on our YouTube channel.
Right.
I was wondering, you said the MS4s are exempt, is that right?
From
From the MRGP?
From applying for coverage under the MRGP and paying the fees.
Right. So what improvement requirements do they need to follow for enhancements?
They'll essentially have to bring their connected road segments up to our standards as part of their stormwater management plans for the MS4 permit.
What is it
Yeah. Okay. Other questions in the room before we go online? In the back?
On class 4 town highways, when we talked about gully erosion, how is that, what is the baseline from which that is measured? Because sometimes you look at a class 4 town highway that hasn't been maintained in 50 or 100 years, and you could see where perhaps the erosion over time has been 3 feet that used to be there that's no longer there.
I guess it depends on where it happens in the road cross-section, but if it's on the travel lane, it would be from the travel lane, yes, down, yeah.
Not some historical point in the past.
Right, or, yes, I think you might be thinking about, talking about what we call sunken roads, where, yeah, not the sunken roads, yeah. Or it could be from the culvert invert, measuring that, depending on where you are in the road cross-section.
Another question?
Yep.
When we stabilize stone line ditches, and those stone line ditches accumulate sediment that we're collecting, what are the disposal requirements for that collected sediment?
I guess there's really two questions there. We have, I'll plug that we have a roads roundtable forums coming up this spring with VTrans, Local Roads, and Better Roads, and myself, and DEC River Engineers, starting in late April, where we actually get into the how-tos of how do we, that issue often comes up, how do you clean the sediment out of stone line ditches? And we often start kind of reverse the question a little bit and say, well, how did the sediment get there in the first place? And play like sediment detective and a lot of practices of how to reduce the amount of sediment. We don't have any standards for where that goes. Obviously, it should not go into a floodplain or a wetland, but we do not have any standards on that.
And then just a quick comment too. None of this is going to happen in isolation. Every one of these municipal roads has private property owners that adjoin it. And it would be helpful if the agency had materials to help municipalities communicate to those property owners what is happening here and why it is happening. Because folks start seeing a stone line ditch where perhaps there may not have been any significant ditch before along their property, sort of helping municipalities communicate what's going on here and why it needs to be done.
That's a good point, and we're working on that as we speak.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I could
Sure.
fill
Kind of can put some line here, the questions.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. One question from, I believe it was Megan online. Private roads are not covered under the permit, but are they still required to meet these standards, or are separate rules being put together for them?
They are not part of the MRGP at all, because the specific coverage is for municipal town highway and the stormwater associated with the town highway. That's our sideboards for what's covered under Act 64. We are working with folks within DEC to set up a similar inventory evaluation and practice recommendations with staff within DEC, some of the basin planners and the lakes staff, which will be doing a similar inventory process, but it's only recommended, it's not required.
And just related to your comments, the WRC has also created an informational flyer for landowners, and we sent to our grants and aid towns ahead of town meeting day. Be happy to share with anyone who would use them.
That's a great document, and we're hoping to steal that document, so to speak.
And yeah, looks like someone's typing in one more question.
Any other questions in the room, Rob?
Does the MRGP require the municipalities to operate and maintain the practices for a specified period of time, maybe like for the expected design life of whatever they've implemented, or maybe it's in perpetuity?
So yeah, the question about practice maintenance. Practice maintenance is required. That's in the permit language, and the way for us to check that is when we do new road erosion inventories. Essentially, a segment of road can be brought up to meet our standards and then fall back and not meet our standards if it's not maintained. So when they do the road erosion inventory, the next time we'll catch it.
And at what interval do they have to do that?
Approximately every 5 years. Or every permit cycle. Permit cycle runs about every 5 years.
There was just support for the outreach materials for the
Yes.
public explaining the requirements and anticipated costs of the municipal budget.
Awesome.
So just to confirm, the most cost-effective way would be to do improvements kind of at the top of the road watershed and work towards disconnecting the roads from the lower segments.
Yes, disconnection, infiltration, before stabilizing conveyances. Money well spent. Definitely.
If drive culverts weren't part of a municipality's maintenance agreement, or the municipality didn't maintain it prior, will they have to? They obviously have to now.
Well, ultimately, the town would be responsible if a drive culvert within the right-of-way doesn't meet the MRGP standards. So town would be ultimately responsible. Lots of towns have good driveway ordinances, and Millie's in the room here from the League of Cities and Towns. She's been working on some ordinance templates for municipalities to use. Essentially, the onus is on towns, but they can push the onus back to the landowner. And that's what we're been encouraging towns to do. But there is grant funding through Grant and Aid and Better Roads to upgrade driveway culverts, as long as it's part of a town highway eligible practice for those grants.
And actually, I think also an important point, the town would only be responsible for driveway culverts in the right-of-way in hydrologically connected segments.
Right. So not all of them. So, yeah.
Great.
Last question before we wrap up, Rob?
Just a high-level question: Is the the MRGP, is it unique, or do other states use a similar framework?
That's a good question.
Yes,
Yeah.
did you rob from some of those states in terms of standards and thresholds? And
we
stuff
did
like
some
that?
initial research, and we couldn't find anything similar in other states. So we had to create from scratch, which was a double-edged sword, I guess. But we had to do a lot of research. We had to have a lot of collaboration, and I think ultimately it turned out to be a good process. And but I haven't seen anything anywhere else that was required.
Another first for Vermont.
There are a lot of voluntary programs like the Pennsylvania Dirt and Gravel Institute and Maine, and some other states that have more voluntary, and I think a little bit in upstate New York have some voluntary programs, but nothing that's required. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, Jim, for giving the presentation today.
Thank you to Fascinate for helping.
And just wanted to remind you, so the Clean Water Initiative program hosts a lecture series every month. It's the second Thursday of the month in this room, 11 to noon generally, and we'll be announcing March 8th topic in a couple weeks. So thanks for everybody for being here.
Thank you.
Sign up sheet.
Oh, I am. Yeah. If you, folks in the room, if you haven't signed in, please go ahead and do so. Thanks.